My parents had the nerve to tell me I should hand over the master bedroom, in the house I pay for, to their precious favorite son. Let me back up. I'm 29 years old. A guy living in the city with my parents for about a year now. Sounds ordinary, maybe even a little sad, right? Trust me, it's not what it looks like. This isn't one of those, I had to move back in because I couldn't afford rent kind of deals. No, this place? I bought it. I'm the one footing the entire mortgage. I cover the utilities, the groceries, literally everything. As for my parents, they don't contribute a single cent. Just so you've got the full picture, my mom Carol is 57, and my dad Richard is 60. They were both school teachers and retired a few years back. They used to live out in the country, but once retirement hit, they decided they were tired of peace and quiet and wanted a change. They claimed they were bored out there and wanted to be closer to the action. Or at least that's the line they gave me. And I figured, why not? My job as a software engineer was going well, and the city had more career opportunities anyway. Plus, I thought helping them out a bit was the decent thing to do. I mean, they raised me. That's what families do, right? So I found us a decent 3-bedroom home in the city. Not a mansion or anything, but it was a solid, comfortable house. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, and a spacious living room where everyone could hang out comfortably. Since I was the one paying the bills, I didn't hesitate to claim the master bedroom for myself. It came with a walk-in closet and a private bathroom, which was non-negotiable for me. Sharing a bathroom? No thanks. I turned the 2nd bedroom into my home office. I work remotely about 90% of the time, so I set it up with dual monitors, an ergonomic chair, the whole setup, my personal productivity zone. The 3rd bedroom? I figured we'd just keep that as a guest room. You know, for when extended family dropped by or if someone needed a place to crash. Easy enough. And honestly, things started off just fine. My parents were thrilled to be in the city, and we all fell into a pretty decent routine. They kept themselves busy, gardening, binge-watching shows, doing whatever retired folks do. Meanwhile, I worked my job, kept the house running, and paid all the bills. I didn't really mind being the one supporting everyone. I earn a 6-figure salary, and let's face it, their only income now is their pension. And besides, their family. You don't charge your parents rent. At least, that's what I believed until everything flipped on its head. And let me tell you, it flipped fast. One morning over breakfast, my mom casually drops this comment like she's just chatting about the weather. She says, you know, Brian and Natalie are thinking about moving to the city. Things aren't great back in their town, and Natalie's pregnant. They could really use the help. At first, I didn't think much of it. My brother Brian, he's 29, and his wife Natalie, who's my age, had always sort of stumbled from one problem to the next. It wasn't like they were completely down and out, but they definitely weren't thriving. And with Natalie being pregnant now, it added another layer to their situation. I figured, okay, maybe they'd move nearby, get a small place of their own. But my mom? She had something else in mind. A few days later, she sits me down, all sweet and innocent, and goes, "We've invited Brian and Natalie to come stay here with us, just until they get back on their feet." That's when the warning bells should have gone off in my head. But I didn't catch it. I just kind of nodded and went along with it, assuming they'd stay for a few weeks and then find their own place. What I didn't realize was that the wheels were already in motion. My parents didn't ask if I was okay with it. They didn't even really tell me in advance. They just went ahead and invited them. Before I could even process what was happening, Brian and Natalie were at our front door, bags in hand, acting like they'd signed a lease. So now here we are. They move in, and right away it's clear they're not planning on going anywhere. And I can already feel the pressure piling up. I'm the one keeping this household running, and now I've got 2 extra mouths to feed and bills to stretch even further. No one stopped to ask how I felt about it. They just showed up like it was completely normal. And listen, I do love my brother. He's blood. But Brian? Responsibility isn't exactly his strong suit. He has a talent for stumbling into messes and then leaning on others to clean them up. Natalie? She's polite on the surface, but there's this smug, entitled energy about her that's hard to ignore. It's like, because she's pregnant, she thinks everyone owes her something. That brings us to where things really start going downhill. A few days into their stay, Natalie starts dropping these little harmless comments. She'd say stuff like, "Wow, this place is huge. Must be hard to keep clean all by yourself, or once the baby comes, we're gonna need tons of space." I brushed it off at first. Thought maybe she was just making conversation. But then came the bombshell. One evening after I'd wrapped up a full day of work, Brian and Natalie asked to talk. I figured maybe, just maybe, they were going to thank me or offer to pitch in for groceries or something. Nope. Natalie, all casual like she's asking for the salt, goes, "So, we've been thinking. It'd make more sense if we had the master bedroom." I just blinked at her, stunned. Brian jumps in, "Yeah, the baby's gonna need room and your bedroom has the closet and the private bath. Let me remind you, I own this house. My name's on the title. I pay for every single thing under this roof. Groceries, internet, water, heat, you name it." And here they were, suggesting I move out of my own bedroom. I was stunned silent. Like, the sheer boldness of that request just knocked the words right out of me. Eventually, I managed to say, "Why not take the guest room? It's got more than enough space and it's already set up." Natalie pouted. "But it doesn't have a walk-in closet and the baby will need more room." I stared at them both, doing my best to keep calm. "I'm not giving up my bedroom," I said, slow and steady. "You're welcome to the guest room, or you can find somewhere else to stay." Brian looked taken aback that I didn't just roll over like usual. "Natalie?" She looked downright insulted. And that's when it hit me, this was only going to get worse. After that incredibly awkward conversation, I actually thought they'd step back and realize how absurd their request was. I mean, who in their right mind asks the guy paying all the bills to give up his room? But nope. Of course, things didn't settle down after that. If anything, they got weirder. Over the next couple of days, I started picking up on small changes, little signs that Brian and Natalie were way too comfortable. I'm talking shoes kicked off in the middle of the living room, their junk spread out everywhere, and Natalie chatting like she owned the place, planning where she'd put the baby swing and crib like she was running the show. I didn't say anything right away, but man, I could feel it building up inside me. That not in yoga kind of tension where you just know something bad's about to happen. Then one morning, I had to head into the office for a few hours, nothing crazy, just a couple meetings I couldn't take from home. I usually work remotely, so it was a quick trip. I got back around lunchtime ready to heat up something and relax, but the second I walked in, something felt off. I looked down the hall, and there's my stuff, my personal belongings, scattered outside my room. My clothes? Dumped in a pile. My computer monitor? Unplugged and leaning against the wall like someone had been mid-move. My heart started pounding because I already knew what was coming. But I had to see it with my own eyes. I stepped into my room and there she was, Natalie. Standing right in the middle of my space, boxing up the last of my things like she was just reorganizing a closet. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. Just glanced over and said, all casual, "Oh hey, I was just finishing up." I stood there completely stunned. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, probably louder than I intended. Natalie looked at me like I was overreacting. "Calm as ever," she said, "your mom said we could start moving our stuff in here. The baby's almost here and we need the space." I felt the rage hit me in the chest like a truck. My mom? The woman who hasn't paid a single dollar toward this house thought she had the authority to hand over my room, to Brian and Natalie? Without even mentioning it to me? Absolutely not. I stepped farther into the room and said firmly, "No. You're not moving in here. I told you both to use the guest room." Natalie wasn't happy with that answer. She crossed her arms and gave me this look like I was being selfish or unreasonable. "But the guest room's too small for a baby," she argued. "And there's no closet. We need more space." I didn't budge. "I don't care. You're not taking my bedroom." I laid it out for her right then and there, clear as day. I'm the one paying the mortgage. I'm the one footing the bills. And you and Brian? You haven't pitched in a dime. If you need more space, feel free to go find your own place. Natalie's face turned red, but I wasn't about to let her guilt me. I was done playing nice. Still, she didn't back down. "Your mom said it was fine," she repeated like that was the trump card. That was it for me. I stormed out of the room, grabbed my phone, and called my mom, who, of course, wasn't even home. The moment she picked up, I didn't wait for a greeting. "Mom, did you seriously tell Brian and Natalie they could move into my bedroom?" There was this long pause, like she was scrambling for a good excuse. Finally, she said, "Well, I thought it made the most sense. They need the space and you already have your office. It's not like you're using the room for anything important." I couldn't believe my ears. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. "I pay for this entire house. Every grocery trip, every bill, every piece of furniture. You really thought it was okay to just give away my room?" She tried to downplay it. "It's not a big deal. We're family. We're supposed to support each other." I cut her off. I'm not giving them my room. And if they don't move their stuff out, they'll need to start packing for real because they're not staying here. Natalie must have heard that last part because she came marching out of the bedroom looking absolutely furious. You're seriously going to throw us out? With a baby on the way? She snapped. That's when Brian walked in, looking pissed and demanding answers. What's going on? I didn't sugarcoat it. What's going on is your wife took it upon herself to move into my room without asking, and I'm telling you right now it's not happening. Guest room or nothing. Brian didn't take it well. He got defensive, acting like I was betraying the family or something. Started going on about how I should be willing to make sacrifices for them. Sacrifices? I shot back. I already am. I'm paying for every single thing in this house. What exactly have you two contributed besides more mouths to feed? Things got heated. The yelling escalated. I was done holding back and neither of them was backing down. My mom tried calling me again, but I let it ring. I couldn't deal with her nonsense. Brian just kept going, saying how I was being unfair, how they were in a tough spot, and how families should be there for each other. But I was over it. You've got until the end of the day to get your stuff out of my room, I told them. If you don't, I will. Natalie stormed off, slamming the door behind her like a teenager, and Brian stood there glaring at me like I was the villain in his sad little story. I didn't care. This was my house, and I wasn't going to be pushed around in my own home, especially not by freeloaders who thought being family meant I owed them everything. I spent the rest of the day holed up in my office, trying to cool down. I didn't want another shouting match, and I sure didn't want to see either of their faces. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Brian and Natalie weren't the type to just let things go, and I had no doubt my mom would be jumping in again to stir the pot. Still, I was done bending. Not this time. After all that drama, I thought maybe they'd finally get the message. I'd made myself perfectly clear. The master bedroom wasn't up for grabs, and they either use the guest room or move out. Sounded simple enough. But of course, it didn't go that smoothly. The next day, I kept my distance. I wasn't about to go looking for more trouble. Honestly, I was still ticked off about everything, and I needed space. I buried myself in work, camped out in the office, just pretending the rest of the house didn't exist. But by dinner, the tension in the air was thick. Everyone was avoiding each other like we were walking around on landmines. I didn't mind the silence. If they were finally staying in the guest room and not causing any more issues, I could live with it. But then something happened that pushed me past the breaking point. That evening, I walked into the kitchen to grab a bite. I was the one who bought all the groceries, just like always, but when I opened the fridge, it was nearly empty. I mean wiped clean. Food I bought just 4 days earlier? Gone. I checked the freezer, same deal. I knew it wasn't my parents tearing through the fridge like that, they don't eat that much, and it definitely wasn't me. So who else could it be? Yeah, Brian and Natalie. No doubt in my mind they'd helped themselves to everything in there without even bothering to ask. I was already annoyed, but I tried to shake it off. Figured, fine, I'll just restock tomorrow. No big deal. But it wasn't just the food that got to me. When I sat down at the table to eat something, my mom came into the kitchen. Wouldn't even look at me. She started fixing up plates for herself, my dad, Brian, and Natalie. And then, nothing for me. At first, I assumed she must have just overlooked it. So I waited. But nope, she finished plating everyone else's food, sat down, and started eating like I didn't even exist. I stood there, dumbfounded, watching the whole scene play out like I wasn't part of the family anymore. And man, I could feel that familiar anger creeping up again. It was clear now they were punishing me. Punishing me for not rolling over. I looked over at her, trying to keep a lid on it. You're not making me a plate? She barely glanced at me. You don't want to help the family, you don't eat with the family, she said, as casual as if she were commenting on the weather forecast. I just stared at her. Are you serious right now? I said, disbelief hitting hard. I'm the one paying for all of this, the food, the mortgage, the bills, and now I'm not even allowed a meal? She stayed quiet. My dad didn't say a word either, just gave this long, exhausted sigh and kept chewing like none of it was happening. That pissed me off even more. Meanwhile, Brian and Natalie sat there like smug little winners of some imaginary game. Natalie even had the audacity to smirk as I walked by. That was it. I'd hit my breaking point. I slammed the fridge door shut and stormed out of the kitchen, heart racing and mind on fire. That was the moment I knew this wasn't salvageable. I had to take action. I went straight to my room, fired up my laptop, and started digging into how to file eviction notices. If they didn't want to show me basic respect, then they could find another roof to live under. I wasn't running a free Airbnb. Within an hour, I had everything prepped. I printed out 2 sets of notices, one for Brian and Natalie and one for my parents. It felt surreal, yeah. Never thought I'd be evicting my own family. But they crossed the line over and over again. They disrespected me, treated my house like it was theirs, and now they were shutting me out completely because I wouldn't give up my own bedroom? No way. I walked out to the living room where everyone was pretending things were fine. I didn't say a word. Just walked in, dropped the papers in front of my parents, and then handed the other set to Brian and Natalie. Brian picked his up and squinted at it. What's this? You've got 24 hours to pack your stuff and get out, I said, calm and steady. If you're still here after that, I'm calling the cops. His face went white. He was totally blindsided. You're joking, he said, blinking hard. I'm not, I replied. I've had enough. You've been mooching off me this whole time, contributing absolutely nothing, and now you think you can just take over the place like you own it? That ends today. Brian jumped to his feet, trying to get all puffed up, but I didn't flinch. I was bigger, I was done being pushed around, and I wasn't backing down. We're family, he snapped through clenched teeth. You can't just throw us out. Oh, I can, I said, stepping forward. This is my house. You don't pay the mortgage, you don't cover the bills, and you don't get to disrespect me and still expect to stay here. Natalie, right on cue, started tearing up. I'm pregnant and you're seriously throwing us out, she sniffled like that was supposed to change everything. I'm the one who's been footing the bill for months while you two play house, I shot back. You've got 24 hours. That's more grace than you deserve. Brian looked like he wanted to argue, but you could see it on his face. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Then my mom finally broke her silence. Honey, you can't do this, she said quietly. They're your brother and sister-in-law. This is family. I shook my head and pointed to the notice in her hands. It's already done. You've got 30 days to find somewhere else too. If you're not gone by then, I'll take legal action. The room went completely still. My dad just stared down at the table like he was trying to disappear. My mom looked like she was on the edge of tears. But I didn't care anymore. This wasn't about kindness, it was about drawing the line. After a long silence, I turned and walked back to my room. I locked the door, sat at my desk, and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I just kicked out my own family. Something I never imagined I'd have to do. But you know what? It felt right. It felt like finally standing up for myself. For the first time in weeks, the house was completely quiet. Nobody came knocking. Nobody tried to argue. And honestly, I think they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. They didn't respect me. And if they couldn't offer the most basic level of respect, they didn't deserve to live under my roof. That night, I slept better than I had in a long time. Update 1. After I handed out those eviction notices, I figured one of two things would happen. Either the house would blow up in another screaming match, or they'd finally take me seriously and back off. Either way, there was no turning back now. I'd drawn the line and I wasn't letting anyone cross it again. But what I didn't expect was silence. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I had anywhere to be, just couldn't sleep much. My mind was racing, waiting for the fallout. Part of me expected Brian to come banging on my door, demanding I rethink things. Or maybe my parents would try to guilt me into softening up. But none of that happened. When I finally walked out to the kitchen to make myself some breakfast, the place was dead quiet. No signs of life. No Brian. No Natalie. Not even my parents. For a moment, I almost let myself believe they'd packed up and left in the middle of the night. But I knew better, that was just wishful thinking. I made my coffee, sat down at the table, and waited. I wasn't interested in talking. I wasn't about to justify myself again. What I did needed to be done. They pushed me way too far, and I couldn't keep living in that pressure cooker. They had zero respect for me, for the fact I was paying for everything, for the house itself. I didn't even want anything big from them, just common decency. And even that had apparently been too much to ask. After a while, my mom finally wandered into the kitchen. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept a wink. She didn't say anything. Just poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. That morning in the kitchen was the first time my mom and I had really been alone since I handed her the eviction notice. The silence between us felt heavy, like a storm cloud just waiting to break, until she finally spoke. Honey, she began, voice soft and tired, I know things have gotten out of control. I didn't respond. Just stared down at my coffee, waiting for whatever else she was going to say. Part of me expected an apology, maybe not a full one, but something close. But I wasn't about to make it easy for her. Not after everything. She kept going, her voice cracking a little. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten between you and your brother. We were trying to help them. I didn't see how unfair it was to you. That actually caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting her to own up to it. Not that quickly, anyway. For a brief second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was finally seeing things for what they were. That I wasn't the bad guy in this mess. But the frustration was still sitting heavy in my chest and I couldn't just let it slide. You didn't just ignore what I wanted, I said, sharper than I intended. You took their side every single time, like it didn't matter what I thought, as if you expected me to just roll over and take it. She nodded slowly, almost in a whisper. I know. We just thought, well, you've always been the strong one. And Brian, he's never had it easy. That line again. Always the same excuse. Brian's the fragile one. Brian's had it rough. Brian needs support. It was like they thought because I kept things together I didn't have limits. And you think it's been easy for me? I asked, trying to keep my anger in check. I'm the one who bought this house. I pay the mortgage. I buy the food. I've been covering everything, and you think I can just keep doing that forever? She didn't respond right away. Just stared into her mug, her expression heavy. I know you've done a lot, she said finally, more than we could ever ask for. But with the baby coming. I cut her off right there. This isn't about the baby, I said flatly. It's about respect. And none of you have shown me any. She let out a tired sigh, like she didn't have the energy to argue anymore. But I wasn't finished. You thought you were doing the right thing, I said, picking up where she left off. But Brian and Natalie? They've had chance after chance. And whose fault is it they don't have much now? I didn't invite them here. I didn't ask for any of this. You can't keep throwing me under the bus to make their lives easier. She nodded again this time, maybe really getting it. Or at least trying to. We'll figure something out, she said softly. But please don't kick us out. Not like this. I leaned back in my chair, trying to find a little calm in myself. It's not like I wanted to evict my parents. They're still my mom and dad. But I couldn't live like this anymore. The lack of boundaries, the constant disrespect, it had gone too far. I had to draw the line. I don't want to push you out, I told her, keeping my voice even. But something has to change. I can't keep living in my own house like I don't matter. If things don't change, then yeah, you'll need to find somewhere else. She didn't fight it. Just gave a small nod and said, okay. We'll figure something out. Then she stood up and left the kitchen, leaving me there alone with my thoughts again. I didn't know if things would actually change, but for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand I wasn't playing around anymore. Brian and Natalie still hadn't shown their faces. Whether that was a good sign or not, I couldn't say. But one thing was for sure, they were on borrowed time. Later that afternoon, Brian finally made his appearance. And of course, he looked like he'd spent all day sulking. He didn't say a word when he walked in. Just sat across from me in the living room with that same sour expression he always wore when things didn't go his way. So this is how it's gonna be? He muttered, voice laced with resentment. You're really kicking us out? I didn't even bother looking up from my phone. I gave you 24 hours. If you're still here tomorrow, I'm calling the cops. He let out a bitter laugh and shook his head like I was the one being unreasonable. We're family. Yeah, I said, finally meeting his eyes. And family doesn't walk all over each other. You've had weeks to figure this out. I'm not your safety net. He didn't reply, just sat there for a few awkward seconds, then stormed off like he always did when things didn't go his way. That was Brian in a nutshell. Run when things got tough, lash out when someone said no. The rest of the day passed in near silence. Too quiet, really. I didn't know what Brian and Natalie were planning. But I had no intention of backing down. I'd made myself clear. They had a deadline and I wasn't bluffing. Update 2. The next morning, I woke up and just laid there in bed, staring up at the ceiling for a while. I knew what day it was. The 24-hour countdown was almost up. Funny thing was, I wasn't even mad anymore. That part had burned out. I'd already come to terms with everything. Now it was just about sticking to the decision I'd made. When I finally got up and wandered into the kitchen, I could tell right away that something felt different. Not tense, not angry, just still. Like the quiet before a big shift. Nobody was up. No sound of footsteps. No murmuring from the other rooms. I figured I'd just make breakfast and start my day. The fridge was still pretty bare. Leftovers of the last food haul Brian and Natalie had plowed through. But I made do with what I could find. Sitting there at the table, chewing on dry toast, I couldn't help but think about how fast everything had spiraled out of control. Not that long ago, things were fine. My parents and I had a decent rhythm going. I was working, paying for the house, taking care of everything, and life just kind of rolled on. Then Brian and Natalie showed up, and everything flipped. It's wild how quickly things fall apart when people start acting entitled to things they didn't earn. A couple of hours passed, and I finally heard someone walking down the hall. It was my dad. He entered quietly, poured himself a cup of coffee, and sat across from me at the table. For a while, he didn't say a thing, just stared out the window like he was somewhere else entirely. Then, finally, he spoke. "Brian and Natalie are leaving today." I didn't react right away. I wasn't sure if he meant they'd made the decision on their own, or if he was just acknowledging the deadline. Either way, I gave a slow nod and kept eating. "They don't have anywhere to go," he added after a pause. "They'll be staying at a motel for now, just until they figure something out." I paused mid-bite and glanced at my dad. A small part of me felt a little guilty, sure, but the bigger part? It knew this was necessary. I'd spent too long being the nice guy, letting things slide, hoping it would get better. But if I didn't draw a hard line now, they were just going to keep walking all over me. "I gave them time," I said evenly, keeping my voice calm and steady. "I didn't want it to come to this, but they forced my hand." He didn't try to argue, didn't toss out any guilt trips or lecture me about family loyalty. He just nodded silently and took another sip of his coffee. That was when I realized he finally understood I meant business. That this wasn't just another argument I'd back down from. Too much damage had been done for things to ever go back to how they were. Around midday, Brian and Natalie started gathering their things. I stayed in my room. I didn't need another confrontation, and I definitely didn't need to hear any more passive-aggressive sighs or martyr-like complaints about being thrown out. But it wasn't long before I heard Brian's voice down the hallway, getting louder. I knew it was only a matter of time before he came looking for one last jab. Sure enough, a knock landed on my door. I opened it, and there he was, still wearing that bitter glare he'd had since I handed him the eviction notice. "You're really doing this?" he said, his tone sharp and accusatory. "You're actually going to kick us out?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded across my chest. "I gave you 24 hours. I told you what needed to happen." He shook his head, jaw tight with anger. "We're family, man. You don't do this to family." I took a breath, steadying myself before I spoke. "Family doesn't take advantage of each other," I said. "I'm not throwing you out for no reason. You've been living here rent-free for weeks, haven't lifted a finger. And on top of that, you tried to take my bedroom. In my house, that I pay for." Brian didn't respond right away. You could see it in his face. He wanted to say something, to argue, but deep down he knew I was right. He just didn't want to admit it. "So that's it," he muttered finally. "You're just tossing us out?" "I'm giving you the same option I gave you yesterday," I told him. "You can either go figure out your own situation like adults or stay in the guest room and treat me and this house with some basic respect. But if you can't do that, then yeah, you're out." Brian gave me one last glare before turning on his heel and storming off without another word. I shut the door behind him and exhaled hard. That entire conversation had drained me, but I knew it had to happen. By mid-afternoon, they were gone. I didn't watch them pack up. Didn't want to. There was no need for a dramatic goodbye or any fake sentimentality. They gathered their things, loaded up the car, and left without saying a word. And just like that, the house changed. The tension that had been clinging to the walls for weeks evaporated. Felt quieter, lighter, like I could finally hear myself think again. My parents didn't say much for the rest of the day. I think they were still processing how everything had unfolded. My mom looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Maybe, finally, she realized I wasn't the villain here. That this was all the natural result of letting things spiral for too long. Later that evening, I heard a soft knock on my door. It was my mom. She stepped inside, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the floor for a while. I could tell she was trying to find the right words. "They're gone," she said quietly. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything just yet. "I never thought it would come to this," she admitted. "I didn't realize how much pressure we were putting on you." Some of the anger I'd been carrying started to ease just a little. "It's not like I didn't want to help," I told her. "But you treated me like I didn't matter, like my space, my needs. None of it was important." She sighed and nodded. "You're right. We should have seen it sooner. We sat there in silence for a few moments. Not awkward, just heavy with everything unspoken. I could see she was upset, but for the first time, she seemed to really get where I was coming from. I don't want you and Dad to have to leave, I said, breaking the silence. But if things don't change, I can't keep living like this. She stood slowly and looked at me, her face softer now. We'll figure it out, she said. Things will be different. I promise. As she walked out of the room, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion settle over me. The ordeal with Brian and Natalie was finally over, but there was still some healing left to do with my parents. At least now it felt like we were moving in the right direction. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The weight that had been pressing down on me was gone. The house was still. No more walking on eggshells. No more power plays. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a start. I had my space back. And, more importantly, I had my self-respect.